Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm Stacey Lindis from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the EduMagic podcast. My name is Dr. Sam Fessich, and today I have with me Jordyn Pistilli. Jordyn recently graduated from Grove City College as a secondary history major. She's going to be a middle school teacher in Virginia. Now, I have Jordyn on the show today. This is her second time on the show. She was on the third episode of the podcast way back last April. But today she's going to be sharing about her experience about taking the Praxis online. I know some of you have that on your to-do list this summer, and we've been getting questions about that here on the show. How do I prepare for taking the Praxis online? Oh my gosh, what do I do? So what do? I reached out to my PLM, and Jordyn has graciously come on the show, and she's going to share some tips and tricks for when it comes to registration, preparing for the Praxis, and some best practices for taking the Praxis online. Jordyn, welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share about my experience taking the Praxis online during COVID-19.
Yes. All right. So let's jump right in. For those of us who might be new to the education major, the education field, what is the Praxis?
Sure. So the Praxis is a test delivered mostly online that measures a teacher's ability in their area, whether it's their content area subject or the grade level that they're working with, things like that. And these tests are used or are part of the requirements for licensure and certification. And I'm pretty sure all states is run by a company called ETS, Educational Testing Service. And they run the Praxis, write the Praxis. The Praxis is just one of the many tests that they create, but the Praxis is the big one for educators.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I know before we get into some of your tips and strategies for taking and preparing and registering for the Praxis, you do have a little disclaimer you'd like to share with my audience. So go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So as someone who has already taken my Praxis test, a test I took at home, just wanted to say that in compliance with Praxis and ETS guidelines, as someone who's already taken a test, I'll only be sharing insight about my experience registering and preparing for my test, leading up to my test. And I won't be sharing any information about the specific test that I took or the scores that I received.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So let's jump right into let's just start with registration. What are some strategies or tips you have when it comes to registering for the Praxis when taking it online?
Definitely. So when it comes to registering for any test offered by ETS, you need to create an account with them first. So that will just, look like, providing some of your personal information, demographic information, and things like that so they can best serve you. So you'll want to save some time for that. That's just kind of before you can even get to the point where you choose a test or choose a testing date, you'll need to create an account. But when it comes to registering for an at-home test, it's important to ensure that you do this properly so that you're not charged incorrectly. As we know, these tests can be a little bit on the pricey side, especially if you have to take multiple tests for your specific certification. But what's I think most important to note is if you're changing from a previously scheduled in-person test to now taking the test at home online, I would consider calling the ETS customer service number to ask a representative about this. This was something I did because I was taking the online Praxis during the very first week it was offered. And so there was definitely kind of a learning curve there. So I connected with an ETS customer service representative, and what they did was they added a special link to my ETS account that I created when I first registered with them. This was emailed to me, and this enabled me to change my test from an in-person test to an at-home test free of charge. If I would have gone through just my own personal ETS account to make this change, I would have been charged a rescheduling fee and then would have had to go through some extra hoops to get refunded on that. They're not charging anybody who wants to reschedule from in-person to at home, which I think is really great. Somebody like me in the area in which I live, all the testing centers are closed. So if I wanted to be able to access one that wasn't that was less than an hour away, I would need to wait weeks, maybe even months. And given my certification and my licensure process, I wanted to get this done as soon as possible. So I was grateful to ETS for allowing the flexibility for those of us, that are still in regions where maybe things are still more locked down. But I would just say, take note of that if you're someone who is changing from a previously scheduled in-person test to an online test. Consider going through an ETS representative to do that. If you're someone who has never registered for a Praxis before and you already know that taking the online test is right for you, you can just go forward with that, and you won't need to worry about being overcharged or anything like that. So once you have either changed from an in-person to an at-home test or just an at-home test right from the very beginning, this is all going to happen through ETS in partnership with ProctorU, which is an independent testing service. So after you register to take an online test, an online Praxis test, you'll receive an email link that then allows you to select a specific testing date and time through ProctorU. They are offering these tests, I think it's about 15 hours a day because the demand is so high. And there are only certain Praxis tests that are being offered online at this time. So before you start, calling out any representatives, you're going to want to confirm that the test that you need to take is one of the ones that's being offered. Unfortunately, not every test with Praxis is being offered online right now. I think it's mostly the tests that are in the highest demand. So just check to make sure all of that. And then you're going to want to make sure your equipment is going to be good to go. On Praxis's website or on the ETS website, they give you the information. Most, computers, modern computers are equipped with the technology needed to be able to properly take these tests, but you're going to want to ensure all of that as you're going through the registering process. We'd hate to have you pay for this testing service and then realize, oh, this doesn't even apply to me. So just double check all of that. But on the ETS website themselves, they give all the information, which is super helpful. So once you've gone through all of that, you'll receive that email link that allows you to select a specific testing date and time. So you want to choose something that works for you. And then once you've scheduled this, I think it's always a good idea to ease your nerves by checking your equipment again. Honestly, just to make sure that you are still good to go. There's an ETS equipment check, but there's also one through ProctorU. And so you're just going to want to run your equipment through that, and it'll show you, I think it's 3 or 4 little green check marks that kind of just give you the green light. And if you're using Google Chrome, you want to be sure that you have the latest version of the ProctorU extension added to Google Chrome. So that's what I would say in terms of registering and making sure your equipment is ready to go, and that you as a test taker are going to be the most prepared that you can be on the actual testing day.
Now let's move into testing day. So we're registered, our equipment's ready to rock and roll. It is, let's say, a half hour before we're taking our Praxis test. What are some best practices or strategies that you've implemented or that you have in mind to share with some listeners today that are in that same boat?
Definitely. I mean, as the clock is winding down, in your ProctorU ETS account, there actually is a timer that counts down to your
that's not
test,
nerve-wracking.
and it could be it can be a little tough to watch that. But I would say, in the hours leading up to your test, I think it is the best thing to double check your equipment. Hopefully everything is still good to go, but it can just put your mind at ease to run through an equipment check one more time through your account on your homepage with ProctorU. This just makes sure that you're good to go. You're also going to want to prepare your testing environment. ETS has on their website published several bullet points about what the physical room in which you take this online test needs to look like. So, things like making sure you've removed any and all electronic devices that are not permitted on your test from the room. You've completely cleared off your desk. You have a clutter-free desk, a clutter-free mind, hopefully. Additionally, with the environment, I would recommend facing a bare wall. Your proctor will ask to be shown your surroundings before you can begin your test. And they'll want to have you take your computer and turn it 365 degrees. So that's important to remember when choosing the equipment on which you're going to take your test. But I would recommend facing a bare wall and just having as clear of a space as you can possibly can. You'll need to be sitting at a desk in a proper chair, no beds or bean bags or anything like that. And your proctor's going to ask to see all of that. So you're going to need to be ready to show them that. If you're allowed an erasable whiteboard and marker to take notes, some tests allow that, some tests do not. You'll want to check about the specifics of your Praxis test. But I would have that nearby your computer, easily accessible, because your proctor might ask to see that before you begin the test to ensure that everything is blank and that you're ready to go. Here's another important thing, I think. If you are taking the test at home or in a place where there are other people nearby, I would let your family and friends know that you'll be sitting for this test. So they'll know you'll likely be unavailable for several hours. Another part of the Praxis rules is you are not allowed to have anybody entering your testing environment. So be in a place with a door that you can close, maybe even lock, to make sure that you're in a place where you won't be disturbed. Maybe even place a do not disturb sign on the door leading to your testing room or location, because you'll want to make sure that the other people that are nearby are aware of what you're doing, and that can just put your mind at ease as you're taking the test. Also, make sure that you have sufficient lighting in your testing room, and make sure that your computer camera is not obscured in any way, because your proctor will ask to see your surroundings. So we'll want to be in a clear, open, well-lit, quiet space that just provides the best location for taking a test, that can keep your mind clear, but then also meets all of ETS's regulations for taking an at-home test.
Jordyn, as you're talking through these strategies and these tips, I am thinking I need to create a PDF with registration tips and strategies, tips for, the times the clock is ticking. What are some things I need to make sure I'm aware of, and what can I prepare for? Little section in a PDF, and also just tips for taking it online. I think that this is going to be an awesome episode that people are going to want more, as many tips and strategies as possible from somebody who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt type deal, which you have. And these are fantastic tips. Thank you. So Jordyn, as we wind down our conversation today, I know that this is a quick episode, but oh my gosh, it's jam packed. What other strategies and tips that you have for, what other tips and strategies do you have for teacher candidates taking the Praxis? Maybe it's tips for just being present online and trying to be in that moment and having
Sure.
a clear headspace, or, what other things? What are we missing here? What else do we need to add to this wonderful list of strategies that you've compiled
Definitely.
here for
I would
us?
say I have two kind of tips, some final tips. The first one comes when you are preparing for the Praxis. So you registered, you know when your test date is, but it hasn't quite approached yet. I would say, there are a lot of websites or services that provide online Praxis practice, but I would be wary of some of those. The only true and trusted information that you can get is through ETS, the makers of the Praxis. So you'll see websites that claim to have some practice tests or praxis questions, but it is
Say that
really
10
hard to
times
say.
fast.
But I would just be hesitant with some of those. Definitely don't pay for any of those services. If you are looking to purchase study materials for your specific Praxis test, I would go through ETS for that. Personally, for about $20, I purchased a sample full-length Praxis test of the specific test I was taking. So these were real questions that they've used in past tests, and that really gave me a good idea of what I could expect on test day. So that helped me feel as if I was prepared, and kind of guided me through the preparation process. And then the last little tip I have is about physically on test day, how that experience might go for you. So once your time to start testing arrives, your little countdown clock on your account has winded all the way down to 0, you'll navigate to your test through ProctorU. So here comes my biggest piece of advice. Be prepared to wait. So this is something where even if your timer has counted all the way down, it might take an hour plus to actually start taking your test. This was something that I was not prepared for, and definitely contributed personally to some of my testing anxiety. And so I just want to let people know that this could happen to you and be prepared for that. You can't begin taking your test until you've been connected with a proctor. And for me, this took about an hour. I was told that it would take no more than 30 minutes, but it took double that. And so that was a little tough, because you're sitting there on your computer, you're actually being recorded already, both you in person and your screen. So you just have to sit there in complete silence, waiting to be partnered with a proctor. But this could take a while. So I would just say, be aware that might happen. There's nothing much that you can really do about it. The demand is so high to take these online tests that there might not be enough proctors to go around right off the bat. And so I would just say, just be prepared to sit there and wait, in silence, and get ready to go. I just want everybody listening to know that, so you're more prepared than I was. That was a little nerve-wracking for me, so I just want everybody to know that could happen to you, and just be prepared for that. It doesn't mean that your test is canceled. It doesn't mean that you'll never get to take your test. It just is taking a little bit longer, given everything that's going on, to be connected with a real proctor. So just be aware of that. That is leading up to the very moments before you begin your actual Praxis test.
Wow. I'm sure someone's going to need to hear that message. And thank you. That was fantastic. All right, friends. So I know you have questions for Jordyn. She can't answer specific questions about the test that she took, but she might be able to help you out with some strategies in preparing, registering. Jordyn, how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. Or connect with me through Twitter. You can totally direct message me. I'm at Jordyn_Pistilli. Hit me up. With any questions that you have, I'd be happy to help you out. I definitely think that, taking these tests with Praxis is definitely a tough thing as a teacher, as a pre-service teacher, because these tests are supposed to measure how prepared you are to be in the classroom. And so it's definitely something where you want to show off all of the skills that you have, all the knowledge that you've gained. And so I think it's best to know as much as you can about taking these tests so that you can just feel confident in who you are as a future educator.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Jordyn.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram at sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.